Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, so today we have Steve Isaacs. So Steve, the first question before we get started with anything else, are you prepared to engage?
I am, in fact. I like to think that I'm always prepared to engage.
I am sure that you are, because Steve Isaacs is an educator with over 25 years of experience. So you can always draw from that experience to be prepared for almost anything that comes up, I'm sure, Stephen. And he is a teacher at Bernards Township Public Schools in New Jersey, and he is also an EdTech influencer, a community builder, and a leader in the area of game-based learning and teaching, game design, and development. He's been part of a wide-scale research study on VR in the classroom with Foundry 10, a research organization in Seattle. He's been also widely involved and actively involved with the XR4C community as an XR4C ambassador. That was hard to pronounce.
Yeah, it's XR for change. It's just the shortened version.
XR for change, that makes a lot more sense. Because he was also honored at the ISTE Outstanding Educator in 2016, which I'm sure was a big honor. It was awesome, and it was well deserved as well. And in addition to teaching, he is on Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time and community working to build collaborative relationships among the EdTech stakeholders to create better EdTech for students. He has become passionate about esports in schools and founded the Esports EDU Twitter chat, which is Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and Esports EDU Discord server. You can find the link to that Discord on the show notes at professorgame.com. If you look for Steven or Steve, you'll certainly find the links to this episode. So Steve, is there anything else that you would like to say from this intro? Anything we've missed out?
Just the other thing that's pretty big on my plate these days is I'm the lead content producer for Mindfair, which is a large Minecraft convention. It's actually the official North American, it's the official Minecraft community event for North America. And we run about 10 events a year around the country.
That is true. I completely missed that from that intro, but it is certainly very relevant because Minecraft has been having some awesome applications in education lately.
Absolutely.
So Steve, we want to get kickstart with something that might sound like a typical question, but I think it's very important for many teachers like yourself that sometimes they see and they look up and they say, well, Steve has over 25 years of experience. This guy has it all figured out. But we want to see, what does a regular day look like? Because I'm sure that there's awesome things going on, but there's also very regular day-to-day life that goes on. And I want you to come closer to the engagers, to our listeners.
Sure. So, gosh, a typical day, I wake up, I brush my teeth. No, I have, love the little bit of time I have in the morning with the family. Then typically I'm heading to school. I am fortunate in that my daughter goes to school in the same district, so we get to commute together every morning, and I drop her off, and then I come over to the middle school, and my day is very, it's changed. It's transformed over time. It used to be a lot of teaching and then having kids follow what they're doing, and then it was always project-based, so after the, somewhat amount of teaching, then they were working independently. But it's moved a lot more to kids having choice in their learning path. So my course is gamified, and it's a quest-based approach. So aside from certain pathways that most of the kids go through, they have a lot of choice in terms of what learning path they take. And those different learning paths all have different quests that I've developed that still align with our learning outcomes for my course, but give kids a lot of opportunity to explore and find what they're interested in and then pursue that down, kind of go down that rabbit hole, pretty deep. So a lot of my day is supporting different kids doing different types of projects, maybe even using different tools and such. And that allows for a real unique experience where I get to spend a lot of time learning, I like to say with and from or co-learning with my students, because their interests and needs become different and branch off so much that it kind of encourages an environment where they are responsible for their own learning. And I love to help and support with that. But it's really more about learning how to learn and to accomplish what you need than it is about me directly teaching. And that's very exciting for me because, for one, the kids figure so much out and then impress me all the time. And when they do need help with something and I can sit with them, I think by my kind of going alongside them and searching for what we might need, I think it's modeling, how to learn as well. And I think they get to see me engaged in that learning process. And I'd rather model that and have them leave knowing how to learn than leave my class knowing how to do just what I taught them to do. So it's very, there's a fairly free flowing thing going on often. And it also allows me to support. Sometimes there are kids that do need a little more guidance. And when the kids that can take on this independent, approach to learning, it also frees me up a little bit in those cases to help the kids that might need a little more attention, I would say. And then it's a lot of play, a lot of fun. During lunch, I have a group of kids that come in almost every day, and that's they could come into work or they could come into play. So I even get my gaming in then. I have a group that I've been playing StarCraft with a lot during lunch, and that makes me very happy, and that kind of thing. And then we also have like an after-school game club. So I'm immersed in games, but also immersed in hard fun with kids really going out there and learning and owning their learning.
Wow, that sounds very complete and exciting. I let you go directly into that rant because I could spot many, many interesting things that go around as trends, this whole adaptive and personalized learning. There you're doing it directly.
Yeah.
This active learning, there you go. You got it as well. Owning your learning, there you got it as well. And all these things are, well, it's maybe not the only way, but they're completely potentiated or fueled by this whole game and the gamification that you're introducing into your classroom. So I'm very excited about this conversation, Stephen.
Thanks.
Now, from all this excitement, I want to make a shift because also, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes when somebody is getting started and thinking of, well, is this for me? Is it not for me? Is it too difficult? They think that, it's all only rainbows and ponies and and unicorns. And it certainly isn't. We have iterations, we have learnings, and we have failed attempts or first attempts in learnings, which we call also fails. And we would like to hear a story from one of those times when something happened, it didn't go the way you expected it, what you learned from it, how you came out. Can you bring us to the ground level? Tell us that story, Stephen.
Sure. In fact, I have two kind of almost the same story. It's really the same story. But twice I have approached things in a way that was maybe overly ambitious. When I started my game development course here, it's a middle school elective. One of the things we wrote into the curriculum, which required us purchasing an Xbox for the classroom, which I thought was pretty cool to have in my curriculum needs. And the reason we did that is that I wanted to teach kids Visual C# and programming because I knew that you could sort of, program for the Xbox with this environment. And my course isn't intended to be a hardcore computer science course. So what I found that happened that was very interesting is we would have a unit on Game Maker in the class, and the kids would be up and running and making their game in no time and really, really learning and digging in and expanding upon their game and seeing, really getting a lot of immediate gratification or, at least not holding off too long to have that reward. And then we entered the unit on Visual C# and XNA Studio, it was called. And the project I had the kids doing was that they were going to basically start coding in C#. And, I thought it seemed reasonable. And after about 3 weeks, the kids who were successful finally had something happening where they had a game controller in their hand, and if they pressed the red button repeatedly, the screen turned a little more red each time they hit it, If they pressed the green button, it turned more green. And that was the extent of the coding we accomplished in several weeks. So it made me quickly realize that it was more frustrating than it was gratifying. It was not, accomplishing what I thought, which was like, wow, won't it be cool if these kids can create their own game for the Xbox? So it really was kind of a fail. And I've had similar experiences more recently. And this one's interesting because of the lesson learned. My kids with our virtual reality stuff, we're focusing on content creation. So my initial thought there was, let's go right to Unity and get these kids learning Unity. And I've heard from some teachers they've had great success with middle school kids in Unity. I find the learning curve to be kind of rough. And I've had some kids that have been fairly successful, but a lot of challenge and a lot of not really making too great of progress. And then last semester, taking a step back from that, it occurred to me, so Minecraft, which we use extensively and the kids know very well, can run in virtual reality, the Windows 10 edition. So I proposed to a group of students that if they wanted to create their game or experience in Minecraft with the intentionality or the intention of it being a virtual reality experience, that I would encourage that. And I had one team that did a phenomenal job, the three of them working together. They could work in Minecraft, not in VR, but test it in VR. They had one person often in the headset testing it and giving immediate feedback that the teammates were fixing right away. So again, it was one of these overshooting and then reeling back and realizing where the sweet spot or the success could be, experienced best.
Wow, there's a steep learning curve there, as I can observe from the outside. Because one of my conclusions there is, especially for the first story, is we always imagine these worlds and these things when we are creating something for our classes. And again, this happens in gamification, non-gamification, regular classes, etc. We're imagining all these things that will happen. And it happened to me just yesterday. I had a session planned and I had two exercises. I had a case I sent them and I had something else. I was well prepared for just one of them happening. But what I expected to last maybe around 40 minutes, I was rushing in the end because the session lasts 80 minutes. I was rushing in the end. So sometimes our expectations, we are really excited about the topic and we have very high expectations of the students. And the thing is that it's hard not to measure them by what we are capable of doing. It's really, 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 really hard. And with kids, of course, it only gets harder because when you design a game for a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, it's getting further and further from our current age range and our current situation and stage in life. So it's really difficult. It's not an easy thing. The good thing is that you can, just as Stephen did, you go ahead, you test it, you try it, you see what happens, and you improve from that. And that's like the biggest lesson learned for me from your story, Stephen.
Thanks. Yeah. Absolutely.
And now, Stephen, you talked about some of the amazing things that you've been doing, and I want to go into one of those. Can you tell us a story of a time when you actually set up to do some games, some gamification in your class? And of course, it was, as many other times, it was a success. And tell us, what was your key? What were your steps? How did you get there? And what did you feel at that moment?
Yeah. So the biggest success for me in terms of gamification was when I did truly embrace quest-based learning. So, originally I had taken this course through a teacher course through 3D Game Lab, or GoGo Labs was the name of the company initially, and it was neat because it was a choice-based environment, and as a teacher, I got to go through that and experience that. And at the time, I was still kind of running a fairly traditional curriculum. So what I initially tried to do was have my kids, I had like sort of a spreadsheet type thing that had all these extra credit opportunities that were quests. So if the kids did this, they'd get, sort of something extra, whatever. And that was okay, but kids didn't really think to go to that. When I finally, decided to invest fully in a quest-based environment the following year, and my entire course was delivered that way, where any activity the kids were going to do stemmed from a quest, and they earned experience points for that, and finishing one unlocked another or maybe multiple other quests. That was a huge breakthrough for me in terms of what's really possible. And it really made me realize that to me, when it comes to gamification, the the behavioral part or the badges and things are all fine and good. But for me, the secret sauce is truly giving kids choice in their learning paths and letting them, unlock new learning opportunities and kind of see what's available, dabble in something, maybe decide it's not for them and go down a different path. That was, tremendously successful and continues to be. And that's how my class is run to this day.
Wow. That is a massive success, if you ask me, because it's, again, you learn from the things that happened before and you implement it very, very successfully in the class. And I think the whole idea behind the quests and that is something definitely worth exploring, understand how your audience behaves and see how you can use these tools in your daily practice. So thanks for that story, Stephen.
Sure.
And when you're facing, imagine, for example, that you're going to face a completely new class. You're going to teach something new. What do you do? How do you have any sort of process? How do you even get started? How does this work in your mind when you're doing all these designs? How do you do it? How do you approach it? Do you have some sort of process?
That's a really interesting question, and it's kind of timely. Next year, while it's still going to be a game design course, I've been teaching at the middle school for for my whole career. And I've been for a long time wanting to bring the game design and development opportunity up to the high school, which is happening next year. So, so for that,
exciting.
It's very exciting and it's different. So while it's still game design, one of the neat things is with this choice-based environment, part of the fun in that for me even is whenever I get a new idea for a quest line that I can incorporate, it really just adds to the course, and there's a lot of iteration. So some things get pulled out, some things make their way in. So it's a process that I'm always going through. So when it comes to this high school class, the biggest difference for me is that, where some of the things like Unity, where I've been thinking that it's challenging for my middle school kids, it's certainly very appropriate for the high school level. So there's a part of me, that knows that for me, it's a lot about I don't need to learn everything to be able to teach everything, but I want to learn enough to be, better in the conversation with the students. So, so my goals become, what should I be dabbling more in and learning more about so I'm better equipped to take on this new challenge. So that's kind of where I am right now is this, now thinking ahead for next year, like just, and I truly am passionate about learning. I think it's, if I had more time, I would like to be learning all these different tools. So it's very exciting, that part of it. So, that's kind of my next process. And actually another thing is I'm involved in a project creating a number of, we're going to be developing and delivering hackathons, virtual reality and augmented reality hackathons for middle school students as part of a grant. So with that, a big part of what I'm doing right now is what I call the discovery phase. So it's a lot of both, again, exploring myself, but also, bringing kids into that process. So I've had some students that I know are the type that if I just kind of throw something their way, almost like you probably at the university level where the kids become the researchers, I'm trying to employ a lot of that where it's like, hey, let's test this out together. You as a student, maybe you can even create the structure for this next quest area for kids. And a lot of that engages them in the co-creation process, which is very exciting as well.
Yes, it definitely does. And it's very, very exciting point. The whole co-creation, I think it's probably going to be the previous week to this one, the previous episode when we were talking about co-creation as a fundamental and central part for gamification and game design. It can be very, very useful and very, very exciting as well, very productive for a way of getting new things and putting them forward and experimenting and having people have ownership of that which they have created and, of course, be a lot more committed into that project.
For sure.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. So, Steve, in this sort of next section that we have in the podcast, we go beyond the stories, which were very, very exciting, very, very good, and left us a lot of lessons. But here we go a little bit more straight to the point. We throw the arrow, ask you, what do you think, for example, which is the first question, what do you think is maybe a best practice or something that if you use it in any gamification in a classroom or a game, is something that they would always benefit from?
For me, it's that choice-based learning environment. I think that's crucial to bring kids into learning that's meaningful and relevant for them, and giving them choice accomplishes that.
Choice for students. It's something, or students, kids, learners, however you want to name them, however you're approaching them. The whole concept of choice is, in my opinion, it's central to any gamification or game, because I think it was in Spanish, I was talking to somebody else. How do you call what you use to interact with a video game? The controller. It's not by chance. You're controlling what's happening there. You have to hand over the control in many ways to your students.
Yes, absolutely.
So I completely agree, and I in my opinion, it's something that is absolutely central to any of these designs. And you were talking about some of the games that you played, that you had an Xbox or probably still have an Xbox for your class. And in that sense, what would you say is currently or historically, what would be your favorite game?
Well, historically, I'll say StarCraft. I have a long love affair with the game of StarCraft from the day that I picked it off the shelf and rushed home to play it. But more currently, and I'm still playing that, but I'm very interested in the whole independent game market currently, partially because that's kind of what my students are doing, is they're, for all intents and purposes, indie game developers. But one that I'm really enjoying right now is called Gris. Beautiful game. And then another, I'll stop with that. But Gris right now is probably my favorite game I'm playing currently. Actually, I will throw one more in. Moss, which is a VR game, is so far my favorite VR game. And I've explored a lot of virtual reality content, and a lot of it doesn't hit the mark, but that one really does.
That sounds fantastic. The first one, Gris, like in Grizzly Bear, or?
Gris. It's a beautiful, beautiful game. It's a platform puzzle game. A lot of emotion baked in, and great soundtrack. Really just a very interesting, wonderful game.
You've piqued my curiosity now. I'll have to take a look at it.
Please.
Steve, is there somebody, after listening to these questions, after your experience with podcasting as well, is there somebody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Let's think here. That I would like to listen to, or I would like your audience to be exposed to?
Hopefully both.
Okay. Well, I'm a big fan of the work of Paul Darvasi. He's an educator in Canada that's done some amazing things with designing games for his students, alternate reality experiences and things, and just a really, really neat guy. He happens to be a good friend as well over the years, thanks to our connection through game-based learning. But your audience would absolutely love him.
I'm sure that we would. I'm sure. So in that same sense of recommendations, is there any book that you would recommend? If you had to recommend one book to this audience, to the engagers, what book would it be and why?
Yeah, if we're talking about, especially around game-based learning, Matt Farber wrote, several books or several even editions of, it's called Gamify Your Class. It's a field guide to game-based learning. And Matt has done a phenomenal job of, for one, somehow connecting with and getting just the voice of just about everybody you would ever want to hear about in terms of game-based learning. And he has a really nice writing style that is just so easy to read, which for me is important because I don't really want something to be overly academic. I want the heart of the matter, and he gets to it.
Yes, Matt is actually a past guest, so I will put the link to his books on the show notes. But his books are definitely, certainly are going to be phenomenal. I'm still having them on my list, which is growing week to week.
I'm sure, especially when you interview people and they each give you another book to read.
Yes, absolutely. But that's exciting. I have to say it is exciting.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, what would you say when you're creating these games and gamification? What would you say is that sweet spot, that thing that you feel is something that you do great, or what we would also call your superpower in game-based learning and gamification?
Sure. Well, for one, and I'm going to throw two out there kind of, but one is, that notion that I've said a few times about quest-based or choice-based learning. But the other is definitely when it comes to iterative design, because I feel that while I talk a lot about my students all working on maybe different platforms, different tools, different projects, the primary learning outcome for everything we do in my class is, that iterative design process and going through that. So I feel like that's the part that I try to formally teach my students, and then everything else falls into place.
Of course, and it's super, super, super important, the whole iterative process. And now, Stephen, we're going to find our random question for this episode. This is a question that comes from the audience. We don't know which one it'll be,
Okay.
but I did filter them so that they don't just ask like your name or something. Okay, so this listener is saying, okay, assuming I can tell what I do engages the students. Let's assume that he's doing some sort of gamification or game-based learning, I guess. How do I create assessments that measure whether the game actually affects the students' learning?
That is a phenomenal question, and assessment always comes up. For me, the key to assessment, probably with or without games, is providing students with an opportunity to reflect and demonstrate their learning. So all of my activities, the kids submit something, maybe they submit a game or something, but it's when they're reflecting on and sharing back with me what learning took place. That's how I assess them. They can share back with me what they learned. That speaks volumes. So my kids, they do a lot of blogging. So when they're making a game, they're blogging every week or two with their progress, and they're talking about, what they accomplished, what their goals were, what their challenges were, what they hope to accomplish next week. So they have that to look back on in the upcoming week. So I think that's really key, is that we kind of like putting the learning in the kids' hands, also put some of the onus of their assessment in their hands and let them, kind of let us know what they learned. And then it also allows us to have this feedback loop where whatever the question is or whatever I'm trying to get at with them, if they don't answer it in a satisfactory manner, I can then ask back leading questions. But at least, it's hard to always be so in tune with everything every kid in the room is doing. So when they submit these reflections, that's my chance to have that interaction.
Absolutely. That's very crucial, and I would even add, because sometimes when these questions come in, I'm sure it's not the case of this listener, but these are the kinds of questions of people who are constantly saying, well, is this really learning? Is this just fun? And the big question, and I've heard other people into gamification as well ask this question: what's the alternative? I mean, do we have these same standards and say, well, are they really learning with what we're doing, what we've been doing for many years? Is the alternative really working a lot better?
Right.
I think that question is very relevant, and I completely agree that the best way is to understand if they're reflecting, all those things that you mentioned, and I would go for gamification because it is something that has been proven by many teachers like yourself that is working in the classroom, and it's improving learning. But even if you're not completely convinced, are you convinced of the alternative of what we've been always doing? I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are thinking that there are better ways to do your teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Right.
And you're willing to do it. So welcome to that question. Thanks very much for your answer. And Steve, now it's time to have any final piece of advice if you have for the engagers. Let us know where we can find you. And of course, we will soon, because I know also that you have something else to do. We had limited time today. But after that, we will say, of course, that it's game over.
So quick advice, definitely, throw yourself in there in a small way to get started. Engage your students in the entire process if you can. They know what works for them, so bring them into that conversation as well. But definitely, start. When I think back, so in my case with these quests, right? Now I have this ridiculously large library of quests that have developed over years. But when I started, it was one small quest line that kind of got things started, and then, and you could continually iterate on that. So that's the beauty of it, is try something. If it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't, it might have only been one small piece of what you're doing. So just, turn the corner and try something else, and embrace, like we talked about before, that if we want to call it failure, embrace that and say, wow. And even with the kids, say, wow, so we tried that, didn't work, but that's what this is all about. And, keep going. But just try, get in there, try something, reach out to the supportive community online, because there are some great people out there for sure. That's what I would say.
Definitely. And Steve, where can we find you? Are you mentioned some of the things on Twitter? I'll put your Discus channel as well, the Discord channel that you mentioned. Where else can we find you?
Well, so Twitter, I'm at Mr. like Mr_Isaacs, Mr. Isaacs. I'm very active, and Twitter is a great place to find me. Email works as well. I'll give you this one. Steve at Minefaire, minefaire.com. But either, I'm very accessible.
Do you have some webpage or blog?
Yeah, so my blog is gamesandlearning1.blogspot.com. And while I don't keep it incredibly up to date, there are a few really good opportunities there for checking out like things about like a glimpse of my classroom and how that runs. And actually, recently I've been streaming during my classes on Twitch quite often at twitch.tv/Mr. like Mr_Isaacs. And it's been fun to stream some of my lessons. It provides me with an archive of them. It allows others to engage with me in my class. And I welcome people to kind of keep an eye out for that and jump in, and join the chat when we're streaming, because then I can also field some questions that way and interact with you.
Absolutely. So definitely follow Mr. Isaacs, Stephen Isaacs, on Twitter, on Discord, on Twitch. He has his blog as well. Let's incentivize him to write some more, because there's a lot of value to be displayed by all this experience that you have. So thank you once again, Mr. Isaacs, Stephen Isaacs, however it is you prefer to be called. I'm seeing your Twitter photo with a kid watching the VR and using the VR to create something. It looks like a very enticing and very exciting picture.
Thanks.
So thank you once again. Thanks for all the insights. Thanks for your time. But now it's time to say it's game over.
Game over. Thanks for having me.
Engagers, it is absolutely fantastic to have you here. This podcast only makes sense with you, so let's connect on Twitter. That way you can let me know who would you like to have as a guest, feature things that you would like to incorporate of the podcast, what questions do you have, what we can help you with. You can find my Twitter account at professorgame.com/Twitter. I'm always sharing content on gamification, especially in the topics around education. And don't click continue yet. Do you want to know who is the next teacher that we will have on the show? Then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.